Welcome back to Fairy Garden Discoveries. Water doesn't disappear when we can't see it. It moves through soil, into the air, across the sky, and back to the garden again. This traveling helps plants grow, keeps the soil healthy, and brings balance back to the land. The fairy garden woke up soggy. Puddles stretched across the winding paths like shiny mirrors. Leaves drooped under the weight of water clinging to their edges. Drip, drip, dripping steadily to the ground below. Flowers bowed low, their petals heavy with dew and rain. Fairies tiptoed carefully, hopping from stone to stone to keep their feet dry. "My wings are soaked," one fairy sighed. "I splashed my boots again," another complained. Nearby, frogs cheered and leapt joyfully from puddle to puddle, delighted by the rain. "Best morning ever," one croaked. The garden was very alive, just a little too wet. Right in the middle of the biggest puddle, something shimmered. The water rippled, sparkled, and suddenly, pop! A tiny fairy popped up, glowing and bright, her wings glistening like sunlight on water. Drops clung to her hair and twirled happily around her. Droplet stretched her arms and smiled. "Oh, good," she said cheerfully. "I made it back just in time." The fairies gathered around, staring. "Back from where?" one asked. Droplet grinned. "Oh," she said, "everywhere." The rain didn't stop. It kept falling, softly at first, then steadily. Soil turned squishy beneath fairy feet. Roots felt crowded. Worms popped up to the surface, shaking water from their heads. "We can't breathe properly down there," one worm grumbled. Droplet hovered above the puddles, her expression thoughtful now. "Too much water can be just as tricky as not enough," she said. She glanced at the clouds drifting lazily overhead. "This garden is getting more than it needs right now." Droplet fluttered higher and higher until she was nearly level with the drifting clouds. She waved both arms and called out cheerfully, "All right, clouds, that's enough for today." The clouds hesitated, bumping into one another as if deciding what to do. Slowly they spread apart. The rain softened, then slowed, then stopped completely. The fairies cheered and spun, shaking water from their wings. But Droplet didn't cheer. She hovered quietly, watching the garden below. "Stopping rain is easy," she said softly to herself. "Keeping balance takes more care." As the sun warmed the garden, the puddles began to shrink. Water slid away into the soil. Some of it vanished from sight entirely. The ground dried faster than anyone expected. Leaves curled slightly at their edges. Flowers lowered their heads again, this time not from heaviness, but from thirst. The fairies frowned. "Now it's too dry," someone said. Droplet nodded. "Water doesn't disappear," she explained gently. "It just moves." She knelt beside a fading puddle and dipped her fingers into it. "Let me show you where it goes." Droplet lifted a single shimmering drop from the puddle. It quivered nervously, catching the light like a tiny jewel. "I'm ready," it squeaked, though it sounded a little unsure. Droplet smiled kindly. "You always are," she said. The sun warmed the drop. Slowly, so slowly it was almost impossible to see, it began to rise. "When water warms," Droplet explained, "it becomes light enough to lift into the air." The fairies gasped as the drop floated upward. Higher and higher the drop drifted. "Whee!" it called, spinning happily. Droplet followed beside it, her wings glimmering. Above them, clouds gathered, soft and gray, full of quiet, waiting water. When drops rise like this, Droplet said, they gather together. The traveling drop nestled into the cloud, surrounded by others. It wasn't gone. It was just resting somewhere new. Inside the cloud, water drops gently bumped into one another. They whispered stories of places they had been before, roots deep in the soil, sparkling streams, wide rivers, quiet ponds. Droplet smiled as she listened. Clouds don't make water, she explained. They hold it until the time is right to return it. The cloud grew heavier as more drops joined. It rumbled softly, thinking. The cloud shivered. Droplet tilted her head and smiled. Ready? She asked. Yes. The drops replied together. They began to fall, slowly at first, then faster, then all at once. Rain returned to the fairy garden. Not a flood, not a sprinkle, just enough. Droplet twirled joyfully through the rain. Timing matters, she said. Rain soaked slowly into the soil, disappearing between grains of earth where roots were waiting. Plants drank carefully, drawing water inward little by little instead of all at once. Deep below the surface, roots stretched and relaxed as moisture reached places that had been dry only moments before. Small streams formed along gentle slopes, winding around stones and fallen leaves. Rivulets met one another, joining into wider paths that led toward ponds and low places in the garden. Droplet drifted alongside the moving water, watching it travel without rushing. Water always knows where to go, she said softly. It follows the shape of the land. It listens. Some water rested underground. Some gathered in pools. Some continued moving, patient and steady. Nothing hurried. Nothing was wasted. The garden took a deep, relieved breath. As the water settled into its places, the garden began to change again. Flowers slowly lifted their heads, petals opening wider as they felt moisture return to their roots. Leaves stretched toward the sun, no longer heavy or curled, but comfortable. Worms slipped back underground, tunneling happily through soil that was once again easy to move through. Beetles resumed their quiet work. Birds hopped closer to the puddles, tilting their heads as they drank. The frogs were still thrilled. Droplet hovered above it all, peaceful and watchful. This, she said gently, is what balance feels like. Not too much, not too little. Just enough. This time, the fairies didn't rush forward to change anything. They watched instead. They noticed how puddles formed and faded on their own. They noticed how the soil darkened when it was wet and lightened as it dried. They noticed how clouds drifted, gathering and releasing water without being told. No one chased the puddles away. No one begged the clouds to hurry. They trusted the garden. Droplet smiled as she saw this. Water has been doing this for a very long time, she said. It doesn't need controlling. It needs understanding. The fairies nodded, feeling calmer just by watching. Droplet dipped her hand into a pond and let the water slip through her fingers. This water has been here before, she said thoughtfully. It's watered leaves, filled roots, floated clouds, and fallen as rain. She scooped up another handful and watched it sparkle in the sunlight. And it will do all of those things again. The fairies looked around the garden with new eyes. The puddles weren't temporary messes. The rain wasn't a problem. The clouds weren't strangers. They were all part of the same long journey. Traveling doesn't mean disappearing, Droplet added. It means returning, over and over again. Droplet hovered in the warm afternoon light, glowing softly as the fairy garden rested in gentle balance. Water doesn't belong to one place, she said. It belongs to the whole world. She looked up at the sky, where thin clouds were already beginning to gather again, quietly and patiently. Then she looked down at the garden, where roots drank, leaves stretched, and puddles shimmered. The journey never really ends, Droplet said. It just changes shape. The fairy garden shimmered, alive, breathing, connected, and somewhere above, water was already preparing for its next return. Remember, water moves in a cycle. It rises when warmed by the sun, it gathers together in clouds, it falls as rain. It rests in soil, streams, ponds, and plants. This is called the water cycle. It teaches us that nothing is wasted, nothing is lost, everything returns when the time is right.